Welcome everyone to this exciting session of Ecosystem Engage, the Not So Daily show. This one's really interesting for a variety of reasons, and it involves a number of discussion points around things we're grappling with every day in our lives, with the way the crisis is impacting us. But joining us today, please welcome Nathan Bell, Chief Digital Officer of M1. The mobile operator in Singapore, and most importantly, my mobile operator for over a decade since I've been in Singapore. And so really pleased to have Nathan. It's it's really interesting, this conversation, and I'm really looking forward to it for a variety of reasons with Nathan, because while we know a lot of leaders in the telecom industry, I can't think of another leader who has built and managed and operated in so many diverse environments. So if I can just do a quick intro of Nathan, Nathan's worked with the big global service providers like BT in the past, but he was best known in the region when over a decade ago, Nathan started the build-out exercise for Telstra's international expansion based out of Singapore, running their products and solutions. He then went on to help navigate the joint venture that Telstra had in Indonesia. So really strong emerging markets experience there. Can't get better than that. Indonesia is a big market, one of the biggest emerging markets. And then Nathan spent a fair number of years going back to Telstra's home ground in Australia. And now he's back in Singapore, and we're really pleased to have you back, Nathan. I'm not sure if you remember the last time we met before this video call.
Yeah, possibly a while ago, Amit. Possibly a while ago.
It was at the Great World City Food Court when you were taking a respite from your times in Indonesia with your family, coming back for a weekend to Singapore.
It was always good to come home.
Yeah, and good to speak to you. And joining us also is our Telecom's lead analyst for the region, Shamir Amanullah, who's again not new to the telco sector. Shamir started as an analyst a couple of decades ago with Frost & Sullivan. Spent a number of years with the Malaysian Digital Economy Corporation, MDEC, and for the past many years, Shamir was the head of strategy for a telco and broadcaster in Malaysia. So I'm looking forward to an exciting conversation with you both.
Thank you, Amit. I look forward to this session, and I'm sure we'll have a good time.
And to start off with, I guess, I wanted to talk about the current situation, because it's critical, and it actually leads into the conversation we want to have. It's my view on this current scenario is that we're not in an economic crisis. We are first and foremost in a humanitarian crisis, and the economic crisis is the fallout of that. And what that means is that we have to really, as an industry or businesses or individuals, have to focus on the impact on people. Because if you can get through that, businesses will find ways to navigate that. So impact on people means your teams, first and foremost, in your professional lives, your customers and your partners. Now, what we've been dealing with as a company ourselves, like every other business, is trying to stay engaged and trying to keep our teams inspired and motivated through these times. We run, as an example, a daily stand-up now. So my colleagues that I wouldn't see for weeks, I now see every day or every week, and from around the world. And who's enabling this? I mean, it's the telcos, right? So first and foremost, I think we've got to be thankful to you guys for keeping the wheels turning for not just the industry and for us as businesses, but also our personal lives as we stay connected with our families and loved ones. So, but I think that's really shown some true colors of how resilient the telcos have been in Singapore, especially, and especially for M1. I mean, this is my last plugin for M1. And only because you guys have been a no-fuss telco and a mobile provider for me. I've never considered moving from M1. I've never really had a reason to. I never get disruptive calls trying to sell me any services. I manage my plans. I do it really well. And I have two, because I do a lot of these videos and video calls, I have two broadband networks at home. But I tell you what, it's a reality that my fail mechanism or fallback mechanism is really switching to my M1 hotspot for these video calls. So on that, no, thank you, Nathan. But I'm pretty sure while you've been keeping us all our lights turned on, I'm sure it's not been an easy process for telcos. So I'd love to start off with what's the impact been, for M1 as a provider of network services.
Well, first of all, Amit, thank you very much for being such a loyal customer. I know my colleagues and I appreciate that very much. It's always great to hear those stories. I would say for telcos, and again, just looking at the M1 experience, it's been a wild ride, and it's been a wild ride in the context of, yes, there has been a significant uplift in traffic, and I would make a huge call out to our networking colleagues who are doing the things that people don't see. And what I mean by that is having to go out to site to upgrade infrastructure to make sure we can support the increase in volumes, who are working in our office as part of one of the critical infrastructure providers, making sure that we're continually looking at how do we optimize the network. And the reason why I call that out is for a lot of us, we're actually sitting at home feeling relatively safe, that everything's okay. But when you're in that working environment with others, and yes, of course, social distancing is maintained, but you don't have that same flexibility just to be able to work from home and jump on these video calls, because there are things you have to do which is hands-on with the infrastructure. And likewise, when you're going out to a site, how are you maintaining that social distancing, making sure you're not interacting with others? So there's a lot going on that the network guys are doing. So I have a massive call out and a huge deal of respect for the work that they're doing in supporting the situations like this that we can use. And of course, it's not just telcos, of course. There are awesome software companies as well that are stepping up to support that, but we're very passionate about doing our part. The other part that I would just mention is, and I think Emma was just an example of many that are out there, we've gone through a massive shift for our own business in terms of how do we enable everybody to better work from home in parallel. It's accelerated our path to paperless that we didn't really anticipate to go this quickly. So looking at it from a glass half full perspective, it's actually enabled us to make some of those changes faster than what we intended. So that's been really, really positive. And it's actually forced us to think, how do we support the business moving forward? So a lot of change requests, end user computing support. Instead of going around to my friend, hey, I'm one of the network engineers, my laptop's not working, can you just have a look at it for me and see what you can fix? Can't do that anymore. So all of those changes in how we work and how we support each other has fundamentally changed. And the last point I would just highlight is, from a serving our customers, obviously a number of our stores are still open for any critical items that people have that they need support. But the majority of our traffic is either online through our eShop or through our call centers. And again, those people are doing a phenomenal job. It's quite amazing, the fact that we haven't seen a decrease in eShop services. People are still buying phones. People are still looking to change their plans, getting accessories. So all of that is still happening. Yes, there's an impact from there not being any travel, obviously, but there is still a lot of activity. So our folks are incredibly busy still, because we have an obligation to help people in their working from home, in their family environments. I mean, the worst thing you could have today is have kids that can't get online and therefore are standing in front of you 24/7, Mum, Dad, what are we doing today? So, never has there been a time of the virtual babysitter, if you will, been more important than now, whether that's from an education perspective or from a free time perspective. So look, it has been a challenge, but I think our biggest and most amazing warriors and heroes that we've had is our network teams, who are keeping those networks going, scaling those networks to support our business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But look, I mean, all of this, you're absolutely right. We've got to be very thankful to the frontline staff for keeping it all going, and there's a lot going on in the background. But clearly, we know that the fact that we're using telcos so much more and sucking up all the bandwidth is not directly translating into additional revenues for you guys. I mean, this has financial impacts. How are you guys coping with that?
I think it's an aspect of, for us, there are always plans you have in terms of upgrading your network, upgrading your infrastructure, regardless anyway. So for a lot of these, this is just investments that we've made the decision to bring forward in terms of doing the right thing. I think that's just been a critical driver for us. We are very fortunate in some of our infrastructure providers that they're actually also able to step up with us. And I would say from a systems perspective, because we've started moving some of our systems into the cloud anyway, we've had that elasticity in terms of where we're headed. So it's an easy journey, but I think we know it's the right journey that we're taking for the right reasons in terms of serving our customers in the right way, as I'm sure other operators around the world are going through as well. But for us, it's more just been about having to make that investment early and ensure that we're there to support our customers. It's interesting. I think it's at a time where especially now, where people realize it's no longer a luxury, right? It's no longer a, well, you know, if the internet's there, it's there. If it's not, whatever, we'll do something else.
Yeah.
But especially this time, it's a critical infrastructure. It's never been more visible as it is now. So I think we've taken that responsibility very, very seriously. And again, if it wasn't for our network teams and our frontline staff, then I don't think we'd be as effective as we are. So it's great as a leadership team that we can make those decisions, but it's the guys on the ground who are doing the hard yards and bringing that to life.
And look, we'd love to dig deeper into some of the transformation discussions. We know that there's been a lot going on behind the scenes at M1, but also the industry, and we'd love to get into that. But first of all, before I get into it, congratulations, Nathan, on winning the 5G license. And
thank you. I know the team's very proud. They did a phenomenal job.
And I know that there's a man sitting here who's been itching to ask the questions following the announcement a couple of days ago. So Shamir, I'm going to hand this over to you because I know you've got a lot to discuss with Nathan.
Thank you, Amit. Firstly, congratulations. I think it's fantastic news, and it heralds an exciting time for M1 and the industry in Singapore. I think clearly, looking at ASEAN, they have been leading, and IMDA has done a fantastic job. And it's always interesting to hear views from the operators, because talking to a few carriers in the region, clearly right up to maybe 4G was still very much a mass market, a shift from voice to data and high speeds and so on. But 5G promises a lot of things. But I think realistically, there's obviously a lot of hype that happens with lots of new technologies and so on. But I think it's quite accurate to say the general consensus is that 5G is an enterprise play. And nobody really expects the consumer to pay more to get higher speeds, because I don't think, this is certainly true in Singapore. I don't think people are actually frustrated with the speeds per se. So clearly, the information that I've been reading and I've been getting from colleagues in the industry is that, while the network is being deployed, obviously it's a very infant stage with, the release of the spectrum of 3.5. I understand that 100 megahertz has been given to the winners, and the rest will, take wholesale bandwidth and so on, right? While the network is actually being deployed, clearly carriers have to make sure that they're ready for the potential businesses. And I think since enterprise is a focus, maybe telcos can be accused of not really tapping on the ICT market very well in the past. But I think this is a fine opportunity, to start winning those gains. And Nathan, you have been in that sector with Telstra. I'm sure it's a great passion of yours, and I think you'll do a fantastic job, and really impressed with your credentials in that space. So telcos have to build the infrastructure on one track, second track to make sure that operationally they're ready. I think over-encompassing all of that is that customer centricity. I do not think telecom operators have been praised for that in the past. the intimacy with the customers has always been at a distance. But clearly, when an operator moves on to an enterprise play with solutions, with lots of partnerships, various ecosystems depending on the verticals that they are operating in, the interaction with the customers would be, a huge thing, right? It will be very important, and many carriers would have, like, on the infrastructure side, maybe all infrastructure and all systems and all customer care methods, etc. So I guess all of this is actually being upgraded to make sure that the operations support system and the billing and the packaging and the customer care, and incorporating cloud and cybersecurity and AI. A lot of things are happening, and do you think that, I'd love to hear what M1 is doing. Do you also think that, culturally, operators are ready for this play? Because it sounds to me very much as something that IT companies have, in a big way, and software companies or solutions providers, they have had experience doing all of these things that 5G providers are now expected to do.
Thanks, Shamir. I think I just want to come back to the comment before about who's going to benefit most from 5G, because I know in a lot of the enterprise communities that I speak to, for a lot of them, it feels a bit like, oh, now it's finally our turn. So all of the various releases where we went from 3G, 3.5G, 4G, etc., was always very much, oh, this is for the consumer, it's all for the consumer. Now 5G is finally for enterprise. That said, though, I think there are some phenomenal consumer use cases that are coming with 5G. So just one small example, we've always talked about augmented reality, right? So not VR, but augmented reality. And there are some great use cases out there around looking at properties, using your camera that you're pointing at properties, and it's actually using your location and then showing for that location, oh, it's for sale, it's at this price, you want to have a virtual look inside while you're standing here. So that's just one, right? There are lots of great examples that they're seeing that 5G is going to enable us to do that we couldn't do before, because of the responsiveness that's required to make that feel as if, I'm experiencing that in real time. So I don't think we should discount the consumer side, because I think there'll be a lot of things that we see that come to life. I know, for example, some of the conversations around gaming are incredibly exciting, because the high-end games have never really been possible on a mobile device that needs a powerful computer, which the phone has now become, and then it needs a strong Wi-Fi or a strong dedicated fiber link that the gamer is getting that rich experience. So I think even from that, you'll see changes. So I'm just highlighting that because I don't think we should discount the value that's going to be there on the consumer side for 5G. But look, definitely on the enterprise side, it is going to be a fundamental shift from what we've done before. And if I look at my role and my team's role within M1, it's actually about preparing for that. And the biggest part we're preparing for is the unknown unknowns. And the reason I say that is everyone's been talking about certain use cases. We had a great showcase we did in a restaurant really cool. And the precision you need for those sorts of things, you need that high quality signal to be running in real time. So that becomes really, really important. But from a business perspective, our value will be the agility that we bring. So how do we actually make sure that we can provide that responsiveness to those changes and become very much a click and play type scenario? So if you think about the big software companies, their biggest value is, oh, we're going to augment something in here. Cool, here's our adapters. If you can integrate with our adapters, you're good to go. As a telco, we are traditionally very much, hey, here's my environment. If you want to get into my environment, here's a checklist of things you better be able to comply to, otherwise it's not going to happen. So that evolution to then turn around to, someone's got a great use case for sports or for buildings or for security or for logistics or for transport. How quickly can we do that in terms of days as opposed to months that we would have looked at previously? So that's the exciting journey that I see 5G is going to bring for us. And the work that we've been doing is making sure our new digital stack, if you will, is actually able to adapt to that ongoing. So we've identified specific software systems that we are now integrating and just going live with as we speak, that will give us that future evolution capability so that we're not having to go and build customized systems, customized integrations moving forward. So that's what I'm incredibly excited about, is that we are setting ourselves up to be future ready, and pushing the challenge, if you will, out into the marketplace of, sure, tell us what you want to be able to do, give us some exciting use cases, and let's go and see how quickly we can get them live and make them work.
Interesting. I completely agree with the gaming. You know, obviously this network slicing and the latency is something that, you know, gaming has been begging for, right? And you're right. You know, the smartphones are as powerful, if not more, than you know, laptop computer devices. So this is something that is really fantastic, and augmented reality, VR, etc. But do you think it's you know, is it going to be available in the short term, or is it still 2-3 years away? I read that, you know, AR could be some distance away. Maybe the gaming doesn't need to be, obviously, because, you know, it's just a matter of moving PC and PlayStation, Xbox, etc. into you know, the handset experience, right?
So the interesting thing is AR is here today. It just doesn't have a vehicle to be able to implement again. That's its problem. So if you look at Google Maps, for example, they're doing it today, right? You can actually have that self-view and then overlay and see, where do I need to go? There are so many companies that are investing in this space at the moment because they can see the value of blending the digital world with our real lives as we sort of evolve and move forward. I saw another awesome use case that was being tested of imagine being able to go to a bus station and just holding your phone up and then an arrow pointing onto the bus that you need to be getting on because you can't quite see the numbers and you don't know what the route that they're going on. That's awesome. But to do that, you need low latency. So those solutions exist, but they're not scaling today because the infrastructure can't support it in terms of high volume of users, running real-time traffic, HD video, integrating with data analytics, and then feeding that back. It can't be, please hold and I'll get back to you. It's got to be, right, as the millisecond that you're looking at it, it's actually showing up. So that's what's incredibly exciting. So I actually think it's there. We just haven't given it the opportunity to be able to scale. And that's, you know, why I think you'll see that come very, very quickly.
What would the business models be? I mean, there are a lot of exciting use cases, right? You know, would it be revenue share, or I mean, if Google was to do it, I mean, it's still from a telco consumer, it's merely using more data, etc., right? I mean, what would be the business model for the operator per se?
So I think if you stick to the real estate example, I think the value is going to actually be an increase in sales. So from the consumer perspective, it's actually meaning I can actually go and view whichever property I want without having to get in a queue or to be worried I'm at risk of actually not having a chance to bid for that particular property. So from a user perspective, being able to use it in that context, I think it's incredibly powerful. I think in other cases, it'll actually be an add-on to applications that people are downloading. So if I'm in the mall, maybe I'm paying, I don't know, $1 a month or something to be able to view all of the specials that are across all the different retail outlets in that mall, and then I can match my vouchers to that one and just therefore, you know, navigate my path. Because if you think about our society today, it's all about the now, right? And if there's one thing that people get frustrated when they keep moving from the digital into the real world, is that immediacy doesn't exist in the real world anymore. It's all in the digital. So, hey, I want to look at this. Let me go online to a marketplace. Let me go online to one of my services. Bang, I've got it. It's ordered. I know what's happening. But I didn't actually get to see what I liked. I didn't get to try it on. I didn't get to interact with it. So I actually think if people know, hey, I'm going to the mall. I know exactly where I want to go. I know that they have some of the stock that I'm interested in. I know there's a voucher. All right, I'm going to go in there and do that. So all of a sudden, you get the social element, you get the real-time element and the digital element all combining together. And I think people will see value in that because we're therefore making sure that every minute of their time is being maximized so they can do more of what they want when they want. So I think that's where this shift is going to come. I don't think it's going to be, hey, pay $50 a month and you get this. It won't work that way. And that's why the whole scale piece has been the limiting factor. Once you have the scale in these environments, and you can create this augmented reality with the data analytics, with I want everything now, now, now. That's going to become the proposition, potentially.
No one's going to be visiting malls pretty soon, I'm sure. I mean, I love my football, and I travel to watch games in the UK, and you know, the 5G use cases at the stadiums were really interesting, but I don't think that's going to happen too, right? And you know, so malls, there are lots of malls in Malaysia, and all of them are struggling badly at the moment. But you're right. I think it's really bringing the physical store experience and the online presence, and you know, maybe go and look at a shirt, and an app is going to show how you look at it, wearing it, and secondary, you know, being able to have access to reviews and things like that, and marrying that experience into something that it is wonderful, you know.
So it's interesting, right? Because I know you make the comment of the malls are going to die. I'm sure they will be impacted, but actually I think we're going to come out the other side in a different way. I think they're going to become like showcases. So if you look at the big technology players today, even the digital native companies today, they're all talking about opening up stores. Now, that's not to suddenly take people away from doing all of their buying online, but it's actually to give them a showcase to say, have you wondered how this is going to feel in your hands? Have you wondered what this is going to be like to feel on your skin? They're not going to buy anything, right? It'll be, okay, now I've got that. I might have an app that then captures that information. Then to your point, using augmented reality, I might see what the different colors look like now that I've tried that shirt on and I know that it fits and I know that size works for me. I might try the different things and then I'll buy it. So I think the role of the store will actually change, and I think it's this next wave of technology that's going to enable that to happen even more. But I still think we will see stores, because as human beings we still want to touch, right? We still want to feel, because you find and I saw a great example in the US where someone bought, I think it was 10 pairs of shoes online with only intention to have one, and actually tried them all on and sent them back. And the shoe company was like, hang on, is that a good outcome? Because we're paying for the return of these 9 pairs of shoes.
Yeah.
So is that really what I want in the future, where I'm sending a whole heap of material and assets and commercial produce with a risk of what might happen? So I still think the stores have got a role to play. It's just going to be different.
Yeah. And look, I just wanted to add, I think from a shift in patterns, right? I mean, we're seeing decades of societal shift getting squeezed into a matter of weeks. Some of those shifts will become permanent and we'll stick with them, and some will probably go back to the way things were. You know, I think that's the reality of it. But I do think, you know, digital transformation makes its biggest exponential impact when it impacts people, and we've seen that in any of the recent big success stories that you look at, whether it's, you know, the Ubers of the world, or knowingly or unknowingly, they are impacting people. And I think we're finding more and more that there's a sort of a, not clash, I'd say a convergence between consumer and enterprise as well. Even the enterprise behaviors are getting more and more consumerized, right? And the way we're consuming things. And so with that, I just want to shift and touch on, you know, you've talked about, when I say you, I mean M1 in Q4 2019, there was a lot of talk of major transformational plans, right? And these straddle, you know, your traditional B2C, but B2B plays, digital services, but also regional plays. How have these shifted for you, given that, you know, that was this 4 months, but these 4 months have had like a lifetime of change take place?
So it's interesting, right? Because we looked at digital transformation as providing us a platform to prepare for the next 5 to 10 years of the life of M1, in terms of how we serve our customers, how we serve each other as employees, and how we work with our partners. And it was very much the view that, yep, and it's going to be a gradual process with our customers and our partners of how we shift from this traditional way of working in these systems, in these customer interactions, to this digital way. And that was going to be okay. We were going to work through that process. We knew that there'd be some disruption as customers chose not to engage those new channels and work in that new way, and that was going to be fine. Then COVID-19 happened, and all of a sudden we're actually redesigning our business, redesigning our transformation program for what's going to be the new normal, right? So yes, we will still need stores. Yes, we will still have customer service, but it'll be in a very, very different way. It'll be customer service in the true nature of omnichannel of, let me try and solve this myself. Let me try and leverage community groups. Let me try and chat to somebody before I'm actually having to physically speak to someone. So the whole time period we'd originally expected of unlearn and relearn has been massively compressed. And so therefore we've had to rethink. Now, it has come with its challenges, because when you're running a digital transformation program with lots of software partners, because we're doing a best of breed platform with a couple of different delivery partners across the systems and across the apps that we're creating, and you can have them all in one room, and you can have these awesome big whiteboards where you're all collaborating and you're solving on the fly, to, hey, by the way, everybody's at home in their home country, no travel, now try and figure it out. And so I think for some of us, me included, it felt like, wow, okay, now here's another challenge we've got to overcome. So we're actually doing a virtual transformation, if you will, of trying to drive that collaboration ongoing and still achieve these outcomes. So it hasn't been easy. Yes, we have seen some impact in terms of how we've been trying to run this transformation, but we're still going. I mean, I'm incredibly proud that I'm one of the first customers on that new stack. So Amit, you talked about being an M1 customer. I can tell you that the experiences we're creating now, which will be released over the next couple of months, are incredibly exciting. But the fact that we've achieved that in this context just demonstrates the strength of our organization, the commitment that our people have to this journey, and our adaptability to change. And maybe that's just a great part of the human condition, that we all have that ability, whether we realize it or not, that we can adapt. And as long as we're supporting each other, it's a phenomenal journey. So hasn't been easy. We have had setbacks, but regardless, we're still moving forward, but moving forward based on how we redesign to serve in the new normal, the new digital economy.
Yeah, and would it be okay to touch on the impact maybe on a regional play that you might have got on the cards?
So I think that's still very much our intent. But I can tell you, based on my and the leadership team's many years of experience, you always sort out your backyard before you go and start playing in somebody else's. So I think for us, we still very much have that regional strategy in mind. And I guess even more so being part of the Keppel family, that gives us a vehicle in the future to be able to drive some of those partnerships. And there are some exciting projects that are up and coming, which we'll be able to share later, as in the future. But it's still very much on the cards. But I think for us, it may take a little bit longer for us to get there. But we know that some of the ingredients, if you will, for ensuring a regional success are coming together. So our first priority was always to make sure that we had a really strong backyard that we were able to operate in and collaborate with partners. But the way we've set up ourselves from an organization, from a digital perspective, we will actually be in a very strong place to serve the region moving forward as well. So we're not having to make any fundamental additional shifts to serve the region. So that's really exciting.
Well, I can tell you, Nathan, I've been following M1 as an operator for the last, I do in general, but especially in the last year, 18 months, looking at some of the leadership team changes and people on board, seems very unlikely that you will not make a regional play. I think the capabilities that the leadership team possesses, including yourself and your CEO, I think, we'll look forward to those steps as well in due course. I also wanted to touch on a couple of other areas. We've talked about 5G services, and that in itself is such a big topic. And we talked about augmented reality and this whole display of immersive technologies and how they can impact societies. I'm going to take a slightly different angle. I think at the moment, as we started off the discussion, it's the impact on people, and there's going to be a lot of socioeconomic change and transformation as well. And industries and businesses will adapt to that. My question to you is, so first of all, the government services architecture will be rethought, right? I mean, we've had talks of smart cities. My view is that maybe it's not going to be smart cities in the future, it might be smart communities, because different communities will have different needs as they come out of this situation and as they try and recover. And I think from a government architecture perspective, my sense would be that the focus for governments would be on critical services. And those critical services that I look at are anything to do with, food, health, and education. All three things that basically enable societies. From a Singapore standpoint, there's not that much we can do from a food perspective, I guess, apart from managing the supply chains. But I think in general for Singapore and other nations, I think when governments work on it, remote care, remote health, remote learning, I think these will have to be retaught. And I think there's a lot of learnings that we're taking at the moment. If you look at remote care and remote health, it's not just a question of enabling patient care, but if you look at the current scenario, while we're so grateful to the frontline healthcare workers and they're dealing with helping us all survive, right?
Yep.
But at the same time, what it's also meant is it's put a whole different level of burden on the healthcare system, which means people with other ailments are getting neglected, right? And there are other ailments outside of the COVID-19 situation. So do you see a big role in remote care, remote health as a start moving forward? And how could telcos, how could someone like M1 make a stronger contribution to that?
So I think there's this whole new normal, as we're calling it, right? So I think we're actually going to see in general this redesign of the digital economy, if you will, in terms of, it's only startups that can make that play. I think everybody will be forced to make that play. And I think from a healthcare perspective, I think there's lots of business that are dabbling in that space, but I think it's going to become even more of a focus going forward. So, we've all got these lovely Fitbits and other types of devices that we use to track our movement, our heart rate, our sleep, all that kind of thing. I think we're actually going to see that moving even into a data analytics perspective. So that's probably for me an example of an area where I think telcos will be able to help in terms of being able to bring that richness of the data together so that the various, not just healthcare, but even insurance and that kind of thing. Because I think the other aspect of remote healthcare comes to preventative health, right? So how do you make sure that we're identifying the symptoms, that we're able to encourage healthy behaviors and that kind of thing? I think all of that starts to come to the fore. But from a remote healthcare perspective, I think the biggest thing that we will have from a support perspective is going to be on the real-time and quality of service infrastructure. So again, if I'm a patient at home and I have a number of devices that are being used to monitor me, if they're down for 5 seconds and an event happens, that's 5 seconds that could have been an intervention, that somebody could have picked up the phone, that somebody could already have been on their way to go and help that person. It's going to become really, really important. So I think telco is going to be able to play a role from that aspect. But I think the other interesting aspect is what we're talking about here today is actually delivering high quality video engagement between doctors and their patients, specialists and patients, just so that they can make that a human factor. And this is where, interestingly, things like 4K video become really, really important, because that's what will make that personal. If you can see the emotions on that person's face, something I'm always impressed with in the healthcare, that's something that they always have an innate ability to be able to do, right? I know if something's not quite right with you just by the way you're looking or you're sweating or whatever that might be, right? So I think that quality of communication is going to be absolutely critical. I think the be able to provide real-time communications without disruption, and the ability to provide some of these insights in data analytics that people can start understanding, hang on, we've had a few different symptoms here that have occurred. Use that to proactively share the insights that the data is driving, as opposed to waiting for someone to go and drive some of those insights natively. So I definitely see some exciting areas that Telco is going to be able to help. But I actually think we'll see it starts to expand more broadly, as I said. So I think this redesign of the digital economy is going to become a bigger and bigger thing as people go, well, I didn't need to do it. Maybe now I need to do it. So it's going to become a core part of everything we do. Everything will have a digital strategy, as opposed to people just choosing to be digital or not.
I think I have a view on that. I think, the human factor maybe has not been discussed as much as it should. It really is going to change lives, and I think the telecoms industry is in the perfect position, because whatever solution that you're talking about, as Nathan pointed out, you need that latency, or you need that high bandwidth, or you need some element of connectivity. I mean, if it's for for the 4K healthcare video example, you'll need high speed, and if it's something that is mission critical that involves the citizens, I know that healthcare has been held back by regulation and things like that, but this pandemic has created a situation. I know that it's not. I don't know whether to use the word legal is the right one. I know that I'm not supposed to conclude anything through a video link, but I am going to use the technology anyway, because to reach out physically to someone is difficult. And I think government services, smart cities or communities, or street lightings, or C4I for police, or those elements, there's huge opportunities, and I think the telecoms industry is going to become, if it's already sexy now, it's going to become even more, and everyone's going to rely on it going forward.
Well, perhaps we make Nathan the new face of the telecom industry, and that becomes sexy in every way. Sorry, I had to put that in there. But look, it's been a wonderful conversation. I think we can go on and on. And we probably will at a different time again. I know you've got to keep our lights on, Nathan, and get back to making sure that everyone stays connected and engaged. Any sort of last words of wisdom from either of you before we sign off?
So let me go first, and then Shamir can have the last word. I think the last part that I would talk about, you mentioned about the businesses and what are they going to look like coming out the other side. I think that's another area that we're going to see significantly change from that digital, or the redesign of the digital ecosystem, because economy, sorry. And the reason I say that is the historic approach of, let me just sign a contract. Yep, it's fine. I know I'm going to need this for the long term, is gone. So businesses are going to have to change their whole model altogether. How do they make sure they've got just enough of what they need now, but they've got the elasticity to scale up or scale down? And that's probably the other area that I see for telcos having a great opportunity moving forward, is to be the aggregator of those services. Because when you're starting to look at how do you combine the need for, whether it's broadband, mobile connectivity, software as a service, infrastructure, you name it, that supports the need of a business, but have the ability to make those shifts in real time depending on how your business is doing, that's what's going to drive that confidence back into the economy. Because if we can't do that as a community, as an industry, as a global business, then a lot of these small businesses are really, really going to struggle. So I think there's a great role for us to play in supporting the recovery of businesses, that they can have that flexibility. They don't feel they're being tied into commitments that will potentially derail their business in the future. That's going to be a great opportunity. So I always like to look at the thing, the glass half full, if you will. So yes, I agree with you. It's a human crisis we're in at the moment with COVID-19, but it's how we recover from this, how we set other business up to thrive for the future, is what's going to make it exciting, that everyone can sort of be proud of. So I'll just finish on that moment.
Thanks. I think I'm really passionate about telecoms and IT and technology, and I think what the pandemic has done really is to make sure that all of this has gone on some kind of a turbo boost, and everything is being done. There's a very interesting meme about, I think prior to the pandemic, the question was who needs to drive digital transformation, and And the answer is always the CEO has to drive it, the leader has to drive it. Any change has to be, driven from the top. And the second answer could be a CIO or a CTO, but really COVID is the one that has, moved this along in a big way. But I think so many things are happening. Facebook with Geo is another example. They're really looking at the opportunities for 60 million SMEs in India, for example. So the digital economy has to grow. But I also personally, as a citizen of the world, I feel that there are lots of other industries that are suffering, like manufacturing, tourism, hospitality, and healthcare. And they account for, World Economic Forum was saying 10% of the GDP and 50 million jobs to be lost. I really hope that the digital economy can substitute or make up for these losses, because at the end of the day, people have to, have, financial capabilities to move on, and maybe not enough sympathies in those areas. We are all talking about what future potentials there are. So I really hope, that the tech industry can take on a lot more than it has done in the past, and we should have a really exciting future ahead.
Great. Now, look, very profound thoughts to leave us with. I'm very confident, Nathan, from what you've discussed today, and I'm a big believer. In 2007, as an analyst, I predicted that telco had the ability to be the aggregator of services, everything that you described, Nathan. So I would love to see that come through. I think telcos have an opportunity now to really drive the right digital services, but most importantly, the customer experience. And I think that'll help telcos actually come first, in the forefront of this digital transformation process. So thank you, everyone, for watching us. Thank you, Nathan Bell, Chief Digital Officer of M1, and Shamir Amanullah, who's our regional lead for the telecoms practice in Ecosystem. So thank you, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and I'm sure this will be very useful for people watching this industry closely.
Thanks, Amit.
Thank you, Amit. A pleasure.